After Deandre Corbe won the ADCC West Coast Trials minus 66 kilogram division this past weekend, he collabed with ADCC on a video, where one of the first comments I saw said this: "People, stop wasting your time drilling." If we look back one more post in his Instagram, we see this caption on a video of him training. At Deandre's gym, they don't drill at all. Instead, they follow a philosophy of the ecological approach.
Jiu-Jitsu is just human behavior. The things that we're trying to talk about, these concepts are not easy to understand, and they're relatively new because we use a theoretical framework. A Jiu-Jitsu one, we play the game of immobilization as it leads to strangulation and breaking. Take away sparring, do nothing but drilling, and see what you get. Because we take away all drilling and do nothing but sparring and look at the result we get.
This is all spearheaded by a black belt named Greg Souders, who some may call extreme.
But either way, I'm talking about the traditional concept of just static drilling, where I'm going to repeat this movement over and over and over again until it becomes, quote, automatic, to work on my muscle memory. You know, that traditional colloquial bullshit is what, when I say drilling, we don't drill, that's what I'm talking about.
One criticism of this approach is that it hasn't been proven at the highest levels.
That's not a criticism. That's a knee-jerk emotional reaction to things that people don't understand.
What does it take to convince people? Does it take like Deandre winning worlds?
Well, with Deandre Corbe just having won one of the highest level tournaments in the world, I sat down with Greg Souders to get his thoughts on how this speaks to his unique methods of training.
I think we make a mistake if we assume that one person's result using any method is an excuse for the entire method.
In this video, we'll dig deeper into Greg's science-backed philosophy of jiu-jitsu, whether we should be drilling at all, whether or not Deandre's performance proves this approach, and most importantly, does Greg even care if it does?
If my goal was to create great jiu-jitsu players, why would I have them? Why would I implement a practice that was inferior to what we currently have? Why wouldn't I be like everybody else and just copy John Danaher?
Before we get into it, please subscribe for more videos like this.
Firstly, I have a very important question to ask you. Are you ready?
Yeah, I am.
And that question is, do jiu-jitsu techniques exist?
Yeah, so a technique exists as a steady state. It's a thing that we can define based on its component parts, but it's never repeated twice. The conditions that are fulfilled to create the steady state of the thing we would call a technique reemerge in different ways every time. I mean, I'm talking about the most subtle ways, the smallest lines of analysis, from how sweaty our skin is when we do something, how much fatigue we have in the system, how fast it's accomplished. All those things change every time you try to apply a technique trying to create the same outcome that you had before.
And one of the big things is, like, we see so much variance, not only between two athletes, but also within the same athlete.
100%. The problem is the typical eye, when they look at a behavior, they don't see that those fine differences. They just see the big result, the big outcome. So when you watch Gordon Ryan do a shoulder crunch sumigaishi, we're like, oh, I want to learn that too. So we try to go about and replicate what we saw him do, but we don't understand. We don't see that even Gordon Ryan, whether he succeeds or misses, no matter what his setup is, no matter how he goes about it, no matter how similar we think it looks, if we were to scrutinize it, every time he's done it, there'll be differences present that can't be accounted for by idealizing some mechanically perfect solution or replicatable movement.
His reaction is just going to be dependent on the environment, what's being presented to him.
Well, all of our actions are. Like, for example, like you do something as simple as pick up a water bottle. The rate at which you squeeze it, the force at which you lift it, the angle at which you tilt it has to do with the water inside. It has to do with the surface tension shared between your skin, the bottle, all those things. And you calculate all of that immediately. Like, there is no thought that you just interact with it, and then the behavior emerges based on your relationship between your graspable hand and the graspability of the thing you're holding relative to the intent in which you're lifting it. So the whole system is constrained by everything within the system, and it all affects itself.
I'm trying to see how this stuff applies over to jiu-jitsu. So would you refer to that concept as like the perception action coupling?
Well, the reason it transfers over to jiu-jitsu is because it's a theory of human behavior. Right. Jiu-jitsu is just human behavior. And so there's direct correlation between the things we know about simple movements like lifting a water bottle and complex and continuous movements like sporting games, in this case, jiu-jitsu.
Cool. We can dive into more of the sort of technicalities if we get some more time. But I did want to kind of go back to this weekend. Incredible performance. I watched Deandre's supercut, so basically all of his matches. At one point, they kind of went off the mats in like the third or fourth match or something, and saw you there on the sidelines coaching him.
Oh yeah, I'm with him everywhere he goes.
I was actually curious. So one thing that's happened, it seems like, is this sort of approach to learning is very commonplace in other sports, but it's sort of new to jiu-jitsu.
No, it's actually not commonplace in other sports. I was just on the phone. So in the last 2 weeks, I've talked to practice designers who work in professional baseball. So I've
Okay.
talked to one guy was an ex-major league baseball player who played for 25 years, who now works with a specific team at the professional level. I spoke to him 2 weeks ago, and then I spoke to one of his partners who helps design the practice for this specific team. I've been on the phone talking with them, and they face the same issues and criticisms that I'm getting. So we laugh and joke and talk. They're working at a professional level, and the same traditionalism exists there as it does down here at the pedestrian level. So it's just the things that we're trying to talk about, these concepts are not easy to understand, and they're relatively new, and they haven't been utilized wide across any sporting context. So yeah,
Got
the
it.
pushback is the same in pretty much all cases in all sports.
I have a friend named Matt Guffey that I train with. He's a jiu-jitsu brown belt, but he used to be a hockey coach.
Okay.
And they would do things like what he called small area games.
Small-sided games.
Yeah, small-sided games. And he would have the players, so it would be sort of a constrained environment. They would set specific goals for each of the players. They would do things like limit the amount of players or different things like that, which sounded similar to sort of what we're doing here with the ecological approach. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, so a couple things to clear up. So it is more prevalent in other sports, but it's not accepted as you would imagine. It's just the researchers and coaches have come together in those fields more recently because there's a high demand for well-developed practice at these professional levels because there's a lot of money involved. So people are really digging down deep into the science and research and trying to figure out what's the best way to teach these guys to be better. So in that case, it's more available there than it is at, like I said, at our pedestrian level. So to clear things up. So the ecological approach, I use that term to talk about the idea of direct perception. So what we mean when we say the ecological approach is just the assumption that people perceive directly what's happening in their environment as a way to create movement. So I just use that as like a big umbrella term, but there are many different methods in that system that coaches use to design practice. And the main one that we all discuss is the constraints-led approach, or CLA. And this is basically what I use, which is task manipulation largely. So just different ways to manipulate direct perception, or to use that assumption of direct perception to manipulate somebody's intention and attention in the sporting context.
Going back to this weekend, one of the criticisms that people have of the ecological approach, specifically as it's been being implemented in jiu-jitsu now, is that it hasn't been like proven at the highest levels of the sports. And I've seen you touch on this topic with other folks as well. People ask like, oh, well, why is Gordon Ryan winning ADCC Worlds if they're using this traditional sort of information processing method? I don't know if that's what we would call it, but all of these traditional methods. And then this weekend, Deandre won the -66 West Coast Trials. In your view, how does this speak to the method that you're using to train your athletes?
I think we make a mistake if we assume that one person's result using any method is an excuse for the entire method. I think we have to look down deeper into why the method was chosen if we really want to talk about it critically and understand what the hell we're actually doing. The criticism that all these other champions were created, this blah blah, that's not a criticism. That's a knee-jerk emotional reaction to things that people don't understand, and that's really what that is. Now, if they were to look into the science, what they would realize is that this idea has actually been proven by the previous champions, because guess what every single previous champion in all of jiu-jitsu has ever done? They spar every fucking day. So if you really want to try to push the information processing model forward, take away sparring, do nothing but drilling, and see what you get. Because we take away all drilling and do nothing but sparring and look at the result we get. So, and anyone who wants to challenge it, go ahead and give it a shot, and we'll see where you get.
I imagine if you're just drilling all the time, doing no sparring, the second you go to spar, which is the actual game of jiu-jitsu, you're not gonna get very far.
Let's be more clear with those words too. And by sparring every day, for us, we mean live resistance. So we don't do just go to war, let's go. We are, as a coach, I am manipulating my students' intention and attention. And the information processing model, the traditional model, they're also trying to do this, but they're doing it in a way that assumes that the brain stores things like a computer. And I'm doing it in a way that assumes that we use a perceptive system to reach out at the environment and communicate with it, to look for opportunities for action. So our assumptions behind what we manipulate in practice are different.
It's a lot more nuanced than just saying we're just going at it, we're just sparring all day.
For sure. And by drilling, I'm always referring to static drilling. I'm not talking about situational sparring, which is a form of drilling. I'm not talking about starting in with a specific connection for a specific reason. I mean, we could call that drilling too. But either way, I'm talking about the traditional concept of just static drilling, where I'm going to repeat this movement over and over and over again until it becomes, quote, automatic to work on my muscle memory. That traditional colloquial bullshit is what, when I say drilling, we don't drill. That's what I'm talking about.
Right. So I do have a question on that specifically, like sort of this idea of the utility of drilling. And my question is based on this concept, increasing like an athlete's action capacity. So
Yeah.
so there's those things like strength and conditioning programs, right? If you get stronger, you might be able to hold somebody tighter, which will help you in your jiu-jitsu because maybe it'll help you hold a man down, right? I had the opportunity to attend a seminar with Justin Flores. I just started doing judo, so Jay Flo came and put on a cool seminar here over in San Jose, and I was asking him about it. I said because he actually in his Q&A session brought up the ecological approach without any prompting. Which I thought was kind of serendipitous. So I asked him about it afterwards. I said, "What do you think about the use of the ecological approach in judo?" And his answer was drilling, or the static drilling that we referred to as like uchikomi in judo, just like entering into throws, for example. It sounds like he was arguing that it increases the athlete's action capacity to perform those movements when they're doing these sort of constrained games. So, for example, if you haven't built up the explosivity to do like one of those turning motions to get your hips in to enter into a throw, that's not something necessarily that might emerge while you're playing these games.
But we know that's not true because people threw each other before uchikomi exists. So that's just he's trying to use an ad hoc reasoning for why we still need to do it. Uchikomi was a technology that was produced by one of the probably old judoka who was trying to come up with a way that we could increase an athlete's fitness or capacity to throw, which it might not be a bad argument that in fact might increase capacity to some level, but uchikomi is very specific. It's fast, hard, quick movements repeated over and over again. Bah, bah. So what capacity are we actually building? So it may be that it does build athletic capacity in some sense, but then again, it might hit diminishing returns. We don't know. There is no theoretical framework to support why we should do something like uchikomi, because in all the research done around, and I know there's research on both sides, but really there's actually none done on there is research done on repetitive movement, and it's shown that when something is too blocked, it's not variable enough, the transfer doesn't transfer well, meaning the skills or the thing we're doing doesn't transfer to the performance environment. But either way, I don't think there's any good reason to do it, but I wouldn't be so quick to say that there isn't any small amount of benefit, especially as it relates to action capacity.
I had the chance last night to attend sort of my first ecological approach-based jiu-jitsu class.
Where?
So it's at a local gym here in Fremont, California. It's by San Jose. It's called BAME Jiu-Jitsu, and it's kind of they're not a ecological approach-based school. They have their traditional teaching methods of jiu-jitsu. But in all of this research that I've been doing, I got linked up with a black belt named Al Legora here in the area. And then a purple belt named Randy Santa Maria. They're kind of trying to spearhead teaching people about the ecological approach in this area.
Okay.
So they just put on this class at this academy that the students had never seen it before. They weren't familiar with this. It was like, hey, come during the normal class time, but instead of doing a traditional jiu-jitsu class, this is going to be run for 2 hours following our interpretation of the ecological approach, essentially. But the sort of sense I got was, of course, one of skepticism from a lot of the students who I talked to afterwards, and sort of you could sort of see in people's faces. It was this big sort of shift from what they're used to doing something that is almost nothing like what they're used to doing. Maybe the 20% of the sparring that they're doing as part of class.
For sure.
Assuming that this is the right way to do things. How do we convince people of that? How do we bring that into gyms?
Well, first we have to assume that the person who designed that program was understanding what the hell they were doing, because we can't just call something the ecological approach, because that's a huge blanket term. Because again, when you use those terms, I mean, I'm sure that man does not know that what he's referring to is a researcher named J.J. Gibson, who introduced us to the idea of direct perception, because he's the one who coined those terms, and he used it to describe direct perception. Like, our approach is ecological in the sense that we're assuming that direct perception is how organisms pick up information from their environment. So I don't know if he knows that, but either way, we would have to see how well his practice was designed, because if he had a poor execution, of course people are going to feel different. Oh, this might not work, because they might have been confused. They might feel like the clean explanation of the step-by-step process served them better. There could be a lot of reasons why someone's unconvinced by something. I don't know what those are, but either way, this is not something we usually get here at my school. It's usually the opposite. People always say, "Oh my God, that was so clarifying. The class was fun. It was engaging. I understood what you wanted me to do," things like that. So, all the other people that I've seen put up online, the games people have sent me to ask if they're doing it the right job, I haven't. I've probably met 5 people who are doing it what I would consider well.
I guess what does it take to what does it take to convince people? Does it take like Deandre winning worlds, something like that? Does it take like athletes representing this approach and proving it? Like what does it really take, do you think?
I don't really know. I mean, honestly, I feel like the minds of the people in our community are so fickle anyway. They're most of our community is, pedestrian bandwagon jumpers who are looking for a moment of entertainment. They're not really committed to the process of developing their jiu-jitsu grappling skill or an understanding of how to acquire it. That's not really what our community is about. So I don't know how you convince the mass. And I'm actually not really trying. When I first came out, my whole thing was just to introduce what I was doing, to introduce a new way of coaching to people who really wanted it and really wanted to try something different. It wasn't to convince the peanut gallery. I don't really care what they think. So I don't know what we do there. You know what I mean? I mean, because a new champion will rise and sell a DVD, that'll be the reason that he did well. And a new champion will rise and sell a new idea, and that'll be the reason he did well. And people keep switching. So I'm not sure.
You're doing it because you believe in it, and you're doing it because you're passionate about it, and you believe this is the correct way to do it, and you're having great results with your athletes. So it's not about like trying to necessarily convince other people to do this. You're doing it.
I wouldn't use the word correct, honestly. I would just, it's convincing. So when I read the theory of direct perception, this is convincing to me. And all the ways they talk about how we use variability and how we are affected by novelty and all these different concepts in the field are very compelling. So I was compelled. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try to apply this and see if it does in fact work. And the results that I was getting were tremendous. So I never looked back. I mean, because my goal is to create great jiu-jitsu players. So if my goal was to create great jiu-jitsu players, why would I implement a practice that was inferior to what we currently have? Why wouldn't I be like everybody else and just copy John Danaher?
So going back again to Deandre's phenomenal performance this weekend, I'm curious, as the coach sitting there coaching him through every match on the sidelines, what was your general sense of his performance?
His performance was amazing. I knew he was going to win. And I know I say that all the time. And East Coast, I was so confident. I got my foot stuck right in my mouth. I was like, he's winning this division. He's the man. But the day of, the way he was smiling and laughing with his brother, just he was relaxed. He was calm. He was cool. As he was all those decisions he was making in his rounds were just so clear and so quick. There was no hesitation. And I was like, man, he's on today. So I could just tell. I know him. I've been working with him every day for almost 4 years now. So, I know him well, as a student.
Yeah.
But yeah, my job was already done when we got there. I was just to sit there on the side and make sure that I was seeing what he was seeing. And if I needed to get him focused on something he wasn't focused on, that's all I'm there for, man. Just to see my product go to work.
Right. Did he look like he looks in training? Or did you see any different sides of him in this competition?
No, that doesn't happen very much here. I mean, you'll see when you come and watch our practices, our students do exactly what they do in practice in the performance environment. And I do have 1 or 2 athletes who have some psychological pressure effects, where the psychological pressure of the performance environment reduces the transfer of their skill. I do have that, but it's not like a practice to performance thing directly. Like you see the same skills being expressed out here on this mat as expressed out there in the performance environment. I mean, literally all my students. And if you watch some of our clips that we post and then look at their performances, you'll see the same stuff. So
I was very impressed by how well-rounded Deandre looked. I know in ADCC, I think, at least from what I've seen, we see a lot of leg attacks happening. That's been a big thing. There was one match of Deandre's that I saw where there were definitely some leg entanglements, but most of the time when I was looking through the matches, Deandre was just getting on top and pinning people. he was just holding guys down and passing their legs and looking for the kills. Is that how you guys train? Do you see different patterns between athletes?
Well, yes and no. I mean, everyone is an individual, and they're all dealing with their own individual constraints. So the expression is going to be different across the board. Like I said, the chain. If one athlete is different each time, well, two athletes are definitely going to be different. So we can't look at just the results they're producing. We have to look at the procedure by which they're trying to achieve or achieving these results. You have to have a more focused eye to really see the difference. But if you were to watch any of my athletes, from my blue belts, my purple belts, to Deandre and Gavin's a little bit different. He's a little bit of a wild horse, but everybody else looks very similar as far as the way they engage with the problem, because we use a theoretical framework, a jiu-jitsu one, to try to push these skills forward. And I've already shared this a million times, but in the most simple sense, we play the game of immobilization as it leads to strangulation and breaking. So every time we make and maintain connections to manage distance, to do something to our opponent, we're always considering what is going to increase the level of immobility in the system so that our opponent becomes more strangleable and more breakable. And so that's why you see these Deandre's tactics go towards those directions, because that's what he's trying to produce. Pinning and passing, or pinning and back taking, are going to be your strongest immobilizers. Or entangling both legs, for example, would be an example of another strong immobilizer.
Right. That's what he looked like too. He looked like a sort of a heat-seeking missile towards just like holding a guy down.
Yeah, no, because that's what we do. Like, if you've seen previous interviews with him, he said, we hold people still and we strangle and break them. We hold them down, don't let them move. And that's what it is. There's a relationship between immobility and breakability, and he expresses that well. And it's the essential theme that's spun throughout our program. All of our classes, all of our games, all of our focuses are to help our athletes build the skills to, like I said, hold people down and strangle and break them.
Right. So when you're coaching your athletes, there was, I forget, maybe it was ADCC who posted this clip of you. They had you mic'd up coaching. I can't remember if it was Gavin or DeAndre, maybe both of them. And the coaching seemed really, really simple and straightforward. And I'm curious just your take on, when you're both in competition and in training, when you're coaching your athletes, how are you thinking about how to coach them? Because obviously we're not saying, oh, knee cut here, do a long step. You're not saying any of that.
We don't communicate like that. Yeah. So I think understanding that the precursor to all behaviors is really this idea of intentionality and attentionality. So what we're stepping out there to do and where we're focusing our attention to do it. And my job as a coach is to help manipulate that. So I manipulate it both in the training practice that we create, but also with my language. So language is an informational constraint that manipulates intention and attention. So I want to make sure my language is external and as clarifying as possible. I see my words as helping shift where their focus is going to accomplish a specific effect or to fulfill a specific condition. So you'll hear me say things like make it uneven, or access the hips, access the shoulders, or put them on their hands. This is just to help shift their attention around if it is not already there. And the language I use is directly correlated with the language I use here in practice. So I'm communicating over a shared experience between me and my athletes. So again, my language is room specific and athlete specific.
Got it. So you're communicating a goal to them to like set a condition or tell them where their attention should be, and then you're letting them figure out how to do that.
For sure. Well, the thing is, we figure it out in training. The performance environment is just where we go to show the skills we have built. New things don't happen on performance day, or at least they hopefully don't. And if they do, they better go in our favor. What we should see on a performance day is all the things in training being reflected out there in the novel environment. So, and that's typically what I see from my athletes. I mean, just because our training is so linked to performance, there really is no decoupling here in this room.
So what is next for you guys? So I know Worlds is coming. What's sort of the plan between now and whatever the next step in this is?
Well, I've got some other younger athletes that I've been building for a while who are coming up that I really need to focus on. I mean, my focus for the last few years has been solely Deandre, so much so that even all my classes have been designed for him. So, and everyone else is just, getting along by proxy. But so no, I think we're going to hard focus on the ADCC, get D through that. And then, it's up to him next where he wants to go. But either way, I've got some young guys that I'm building, and I want them to get out there and have some success too. So we got to bring some of the other guys up.
And last, before we end our talk, I wanted to kind of know the guy behind all of this real quick. So I wanted to ask you, what is your best jiu-jitsu memory?
My best jiu-jitsu memory was Saturday.
Saturday?
Yeah.
Very
I mean,
cool.
or Sunday. Sorry, Sunday. It happened on Sunday. Sorry, Jesus, I can't remember what day it was. It was Sunday, man. You know, it's funny. I love to talk shit. Like my favorite thing when I'm like coaching or talking to, I like to tease and get people in their feelings, and it's just I do it for fun, right? But when Deandre won, I was just silent. I mean, it was like the job's done. I have to say nothing. Like it was like the relief I felt was unreal. I didn't cheer. I just stood there because it was like, yeah, we got it done. So I know it was a good memory, man. It's the farthest I've taken a student. I mean, my first world champion was little Alex. She won worlds at every belt level except Brown. She won pans at every belt level. She was almost undefeated as a teenager. Juvenile 1, Juvenile 2. So I've done, you know, I've taken one athlete pretty far, but this is the farthest I've taken another. So yeah.
Amazing. Well, you're a very passionate guy, and I can tell just by the way you're discussing this. And I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, especially after you guys got back so late last night and everything. So
Yeah, no problem at all. I'm sorry if I seem a little like under the weather and fatigued. I'm fucking smoked, and I have to get on a plane tomorrow and go to London. I'm so tired. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah,
Well, yeah. Well, thanks again. I'll let you get out of here and get some rest then. And good luck with the travel. And I look forward to seeing you guys next week. It's gonna be pretty cool.
Cool, man. Yeah, I'm looking forward to you coming down, and thanks of course for the questions. And I hope you got what you came for.
Cool. Absolutely. Yeah. I came here to learn. So I definitely got some of that. So appreciate it.